Welcome to the Conditional Release Program, where we stick the boot into the various subcultures, influences, and grifters that have taken root in the year 2020. When the coronavirus dominated the headlines and changed the way we live, I think only a very clever few of us expected the show to be taken over by fuckwits and paranoid psychopaths. The Conditional Release Program celebrates the lunatic fringe in Australia and beyond to cover the sheer insanity of a post-truth world run by reptilian overlord Mark Zuckerberg.
This year has irreparably damaged my faith in humanity, and I look forward to sharing the reasons why, so we can basically give up on the idea of democracy and steer the ship toward full-blown nihilism and apathy, because the world has gone to hell in a handbasket and should be institutionalized. But failing that, we're on a conditional release program.
My name is Jack the Insider, and I'm a journo, co-author of several books, including The Fine Cotton Fiasco and Unholy Trinity, and a man that appreciates the comedy that is produced by people that define their lives by paranoid fantasies. I like to spend time in the company of scammers, charlatans, grifters, hucksters, hardcore crooks, and utter bastards. And I want to tell you all about them, what makes them tick, and why you can't spend a minute on the internet without being assaulted by their idiocy.
Hello listeners, my name is Joel Hill and I spend way too much time on the internet basically just watching idiots discuss crap they made up on the day. My fascination with these insane internet subcultures started off with the incels, which we'll cover in a later episode, but I've more moved on to the harder drug of Q-anon, sovereign citizens, anti-vaxxers, and of course the anti-lockdown lunatics that seem to relish in fucking with funding stuff. 2020 has been a wild ride for many reasons. The thing that really stands out, despite the obvious plague, is the collective brain hemorrhage that's happened on the internet, which is mostly occurring on Facebook. But Jack and I found we had something in common, which is that we find the deluded ramblings of these people very funny. And while everyone's trying to figure out the whole thing and they get down to the real root causes, they've forgotten to really take a moment to just breathe in how ridiculous all this shit really is. I mean, if a fake internet spy, born on an image board, made famous by Nazi activity and child pornography, manages to help get a suspected pedophile president re-elected on the basis that he's saving the children from trafficking in tunnels, actually happens, the only thing you can really do is laugh. Because everyone's a bloody journalist these days.
I'm a journalist.
Well, yeah, you are, but I'm not saying we're not going to give these topics a bit of a deep dive. Like,
well,
you know,
we have to get deep.
We'll have a go, but we're not background briefing. This is not going to be Walkley award-winning journalism, where you're going to learn a few things, but almost all of them are completely useless and mostly made up by middle-aged weirdos on the internet. But I think you'll find it cathartic that someone's finally sticking the boot up the arse of the rising tide of fucking idiocy that has defined this year's political and social discourse.
And now first, in the Conditional Release Program's Grifter and Shitheel Global News. Well, look, it turns out, Joel, that if you're in a bit of strife and you bring enough people with you to court, you might get off.
23 or more, I believe.
23 or more, a couple of cricket teams.
Yeah, basically, Gene McPherson on Facebook has decided somehow out of the blue that if you have 23 or more of your friends in the public gallery in a courtroom, you can use them as your jury.
I've got to really use that during my drink drive. But apparently, Gene McPherson, and she's basically come up with this idea that look, we know that there'll be a hell of a lot of QAnons before the courts over the next few months, breaching COVID restrictions and what have you. And Gene reckons, bring a couple of cricket teams full of mates with you and they will replace the magistrate.
Yep, it's a magic cheat code that only sovereign citizens will know. And, of course, these idiots are above the law because being a petulant child often clashes with the law and ends you up in court. And the great thing that's really interesting is that not only is this a theory, but this tactic was used in another court, which I'm not sure if that's district or supreme or appeal, pre-COVID.
According to
Gene. To Gene. Yeah, no, this all comes from the world of Gene. Pre-COVID, and we, the jury, insinuating that she was actually there, dismissed the defendant's case.
Ah, yes. Well, there you go. And look, I actually look forward to that clash when you bring your 23 plus along with you, and the magistrate. You ask the magistrate to stand down. How far do you reckon you'll get? Who we're probably thinking, well, I wasn't going to put you in jail, but I've changed my mind now.
I think it's time. Like this sort of troublemaking is ridiculous, and it's really indicative of the way in which people on Facebook really do make shit up, and they make shit up with incredible confidence. Jean has said that she was literally there when this happened.
Yeah.
It did not happen.
There are no records.
This is what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who will say, with completely straight faces, that shit that did not happen absolutely happened. Fucking madness. Anyway, moving on. Let's see.
There's a further sort of edge to the madness here when we think of Jordan Sather, who's an American clown who's been pushing not just drinking bleach, not just any bleach, but his bleach.
Oh yeah, the miracle mineral solution, which of course is only available in certain outlets. And he's a real grifter, and his account was deleted. I think he had something like 250,000 followers. I don't know. Once you reach 100,000, it's gravy from there. And he had a real reach and a real influence. He was a bigger attender of a lot of the rallies that happened, the Save the Children rallies, and all those bullshit, sort of thinly veiled Q attempts at sort of creating public unrest over the last few months,
and selling his bleach off the back of the truck. Anyway, through his website, I must say, but doing that
for regular consumption. He's even piped up recently when Trump got sick. Of course, he did, suggesting that Trump should be drinking the miracle mineral solution through his alternate account with no followers. It's great.
They're probably thinking about giving him that right now. But look, it is one of those things, and in all seriousness, basically, when we look at deaths that have arisen from misinformation surrounding COVID, the big one, and we're talking thousands of deaths here, come from drinking bleach.
Which is very concerning.
Indeed it is. Now, what is interesting also there is that Twitter have actually moved on Sather and said, out you get, champ, and presumably he's going to infest himself in other parts of social media. But it seems that Twitter at least is a bit fair income about removing these troublemakers off social media. But Facebook and Instagram, not so much.
Not the same. Not even close. They removed Liz Cronkin recently from Instagram. Instagram being an interesting place to red pill people because obviously it has a different demographic. It's a lot more of your yoga pants wearing Q followers and a lot of those quite terrifying ones who really go hard on the Save the Children. But knocking her off was a bit of a tokenistic move when I'm still getting suggestions for anti-vax and QAnon sort of grifter sites. Let it be known that, of course, I do subscribe to about 50 of these and I have an incredibly interesting Facebook group collection, but the algorithm should not be pushing this at all.
Yes, that's the way it seems to be going. But there's a political element too, because we are now starting to see QAnon line up political representatives, and we are now seeing political parties, or at least one in the United States, forming some fairly close connections with them.
Absolutely.
And earlier this week, the House of Representatives in DC passed a resolution proposed by the Democrats to denounce QAnon.
Pretty easy vote.
I think there were 142 Dems and 120 Republicans voted in favour. So some of the GOP boys, the great old party boys and girls, jumped on, but some didn't. Apparently, what have we got? 13 voted nay.
Yeah, according to Will Sommer on Twitter, that was the count, and also 40 that didn't vote. Yeah, so they just thought not worth the time.
40 abstained.
Bit suspicious.
Because QAnon people vote, and the bigger this thing gets, the bigger the voting block they've got now. 100%. And you'll see that most political parties, with the possible exception of the amoral GOP, most political parties will run a mile from this.
Absolutely.
And so there's really only a couple of places within the American political context where they can find some sort of favour.
It's concerning because the thing is the Americans have an optional voting system. Of course, we're used to the idea of this mandatory voting. Everyone votes, but getting out the vote is actually a really important thing in the States. And if you look at a situation like this where we're being sort of presented with either Trump or not Trump, and this really sort of limp and sad reason to get out and spend 4 hours in the cold waiting for a bloody voting booth to pop up, mate, you've got people who now think that their vote is going to save children from tunnels. These are the people who will stand in line. They will send the votes. They will turn up. Whereas people who pose with a snowy day or just they're a little bit busy aren't going to vote for Grandpa Joe because he's not really that compelling. Saving the children, great reason to get out.
Yeah, that's one thing, and there's only one way that those votes are going to go too, because Donald Trump is their god.
Absolutely. He's the Lord and Savior, which we'll explain much deeper later on.
As we go, we saw some other news pop forward here. A classic trolling of the QAnon lads and
This is very funny.
ladies. Very, very funny work and some tremendous work. Who do you think is responsible for this? Let me just explain first. There were papers leaked of adrenochrome sales. Now, you might firstly want to kick it off by explaining what adrenochrome is, Joel.
So basically, a massive part of the Q universe is the idea that the elites, especially Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin, famously Anthony Weiner's very forgiving wife, they basically eat babies, they eat children. But the main thing is that drinking the blood of tortured children, which really adds a lot of spice to the conspiracy, brings out the adrenochrome, the adrenaline in their blood. And when they drink that, they maintain youth. And they also get a sort of a high, which is associated with sort of like ultra productive, very, mentally stimulating sort of high. And this is the reason why elites stay elite. It's highly addictive. So when they can't get their hands on it, they start really freaking out. So if you ever see an emaciated celebrity, it's almost certainly because their adrenochrome supply has gone a bit spare. And adrenochrome is something you need to buy on the black market through these networks of child traffickers and mad scientists.
And this is what we saw. So we saw not actual, but we saw some fabricated sales documents so-called leaked onto the internet that basically said these are the children that have had their adrenochrome drained, where they're from, and who purchased them.
And the quality of the adrenochrome, which insinuates the quality of the torture inflicted upon them, which adds
it's not like a fine red wine that gets better as it gets older.
No.
It would be the younger the better in the case of adrenochrome, wouldn't it? Who do you think was responsible for leaking this?
I think it's probably 4chan, 8chan. 8kun now, but yeah, it really stinks of those sort of guys, but it definitely has the hallmarks of extreme pranks. Some of the underlying issues here are really interesting. One of them is the fact, of course, that the address on the thing is Trump Tower,
yes,
which is a massive nod. But there's also many addresses to really screw these guys up. I watched a video on BitChute by an incredibly stupid individual who spent a lot of time digging through this, and they found the registered trademark, which was a really obvious nod on the paper, which turned out to go to a Spanish restaurant in Philadelphia.
Oh, they're in for a hard time over the next few weeks, aren't they? They will. The Anons will assume that this Mexican restaurant in Philly, selling a bit of pork, doing some wonderful work, are part of the child abduction and torturing business.
100%. And the actual racism, I mean, not like kiddie racism or like ha-ha racism, like a bit of identity politics. The kids on 4chan are genuine, we're talking Christchurch shooter level here. And they think it's really funny to basically throw these guys under the bus and have someone turn up with an assault rifle trying to free up the kid. It's going to happen.
And what they did, the sales documents that they released, they really have worked, don't they? I mean, they really have trolled. They really have trolled the Anons. The Anons believed this. They just sucked that straight into them, like a bit of adrenochrome.
Absolutely.
And thought, oh, well, this is the proof we've been looking for.
They've truly mainlined it, and I really wasn't sure when it dropped whether people were going to take it seriously or not, because there is that small shadow of reason, especially if some of their thought leaders come in and say, no, this isn't the case, and people tend to drop them. But no, there's a lot of skepticism in the community. To give them credit, a lot of people have said this is ridiculous, you shouldn't pay any attention to it. But the amount of people who are hardened conspiracy theorists with miles under their belt who have taken this incredibly serious, and of course they see it as a vindication of their paranoia. Absolutely. Now they've got proof. They've got proof that adrenochrome is being sold.
Now they've got proof.
They've got proof.
And Chicaranes Emar are in deep trouble in Philadelphia.
They've deleted their Facebook profile, which is indicative of what's happened so far.
So they're all being hammered, but there will be people turning up on the front door, I would imagine, at some.
I wouldn't doubt it for a second.
And that is the news.
Moving on, we're going to go to a deep dive in QAnon, but first, spray from Jack. If you know about QAnon, you might find this kind of funny. If you don't, you might find it slightly confusing, but hopefully, in time, this will make sense.
QAnon is a death cult, but don't let that put you off. And when did death cults get such a bad name anyway? For a start, you'll live a lot longer than if you're signed on the dotted line with Heaven's Gate. although Marshall Applewhite and his lads did sport superior leisure wear. If you're like me and looking for easy answers to complex problems, you might run your index finger down the long list of cults in Australia. Scientology has always been a goer, and if you hang around for long enough to become a Thetan level 8, you will develop eerie powers of telekinesis. Tommy Cruise can tidy his shed up in 30 seconds, put everything back where it belongs just by staring at all the shit he left lying around. It's a real boon for the time poor. But Scientology is fucking expensive, and if you join L. Ron Hubbard's extended family, the first million years can be a real pain in the ass. Whereas all you need to join QAnon is a functioning internet connection, which, I grant you, under Malcolm Turnbull's NBN, is problematic. In Australia, QAnon is a smorgasbord where you can grab a handful of grease-sodden chicken tenders but decline the great lump of gristly grey matter swimming in an orange gravy in the bain-marie right next to them. In other words, if you think chemtrails are a great pile of steaming shit, but have an inkling Donald Trump is saving kids rather than just molesting the cute ones, then jump on in. And what you reckon is entirely up to you, or whatever the YouTube clip you're looking at reckons. Sure, you have to drink the Kool-Aid just like in Jonestown, and we all know what happened there. Left a lot of people in the horizontal after their small colons collapsed and fell out of their asses. Messed up Guyana as a glamping destination for years too. But with QAnon in Australia, you don't actually have to pick up a schooner and scull down the sort of toxins that killed Farlap. With QAnon, you're only drinking virtual Kool-Aid that only poisons your mind. And unlike Scientology, where you start in a low pay grade wiping Nancy Cartwright's ass, at QAnon, you'll find things out and you'll quickly fit right in. You'll find out Hillary Clinton eats babies in bizarre satanic rituals designed to make her look more youthful, which, to be honest, doesn't seem to be paying off. You'll find out why you don't see kids cavorting playfully in our parks anymore, because they've been abducted, murdered, ground into a fine powder and snorted up Bill Gates' left nostril. And you'll discover the Rothschilds have been manipulating the House of Windsor for centuries and operate Betty II with a complex system of pulleys and levers. If you're the sort of person who wants to spend less time with their families, then QAnon is for you. If you think a good dose of measles will toughen up your kids, the fabulous world of QAnon is calling. And if you're the type of person who needs World War II explained to them and how we defeated communist Russia once and for all, QAnon has got your name written all over it. And do your own research. That is to say, have a look at someone else's on Facebook, possibly a celebrity chef with multiple personality disorders or a failed nightclub bouncer at the Croxton Park Hotel in the midst of a fully blown psychotic episode where once mere delusions of grandeur have shifted to a fully blown messianic complex. And remember, it's just like Pol Pot said, the dumb, the boneheaded, the really fucking stupid will inherit the earth.
All right, thanks for that, Jack. Now we're going to go into a more deeper dive, but an introduction into QAnon, which is a very frustrating conspiracy universe for me because I've been into conspiracy theories since I was about 15. I had quite an awkward morning on September 11, 2001, when I was walking around telling everyone that due to American foreign policy, it was basically coming and that it was quite likely more of a conspiracy than people thought. And that didn't win me friends. But since then, I've always kept a fairly keen eye.
It's nuts. You were very young. You were very young and impressionable at the time.
I'm no stranger to conspiracy universes. I've dabbled. I used to have a subscription to Nexus magazine. I'm not here to say that conspiracy theories are shit. I just think that a lot of the modern ones are not as much a conspiracy theory as they are just a sort of narcissistic personality cult. And I mean, as Jack would say, a death cult.
Well, sooner or later, all cults become death cults. The hammer comes down and all of a sudden you're standing in line for a glass of cordial and strychnine. And QAnon's no different, but its broader reach is of great concern here, you see. We're seeing more and more of it being legitimised. So when we look at the US presidential election on the 3rd of November, everyone around the world is watching to see who will win out of the Trumpster and Little Joe. Down ticket, we have, I think, some 34 senators being elected and a whole heap of House of Representatives. And so we can see that there are a number of QAnon people or people sympathetic to the QAnon cult that are on the tickets.
Absolutely. It's going into the halls of power in a way that is gradual, but anything is scary.
So death cult-wise, Joe Biden wins. What happens?
Well, as they quote in Time magazine, the woman said that she was literally going to take her children into her garage and start the car, which is
Oh, dear.
quite a throwaway. And look, this might be a fairly rare sentiment, and it's probably the exact same as everyone's moving to bloody Canada the moment that John Howard gets re-elected.
Yeah, we've heard all that before, and that certainly is at the extreme end of that particular scale.
It's upping the ante, though, a bit.
If Biden wins, of course, we probably should explain that Donald Trump is their savior. That's the way he.
And it's good versus evil.
The grift all started as a sort of pro-Trump.
Absolutely, it's the way of basically, your 4 and your 8 and getting Trump back in the office. They're memeing him into office, basically.
Yeah. So if he loses, and let's face it, first-term presidents are pretty rare. We've only had a couple in the last 40 years. Pretty rare. Then we'll see. Not just, I would think, deranged women murdering their children in garages. Where we'll see something else, won't we? In a heavily armed United States, and with this all based on child protection.
Yes,
you're going to see a lot of people.
It's a hot button issue.
Yeah, really you're going to see a lot of people, with messiah complexes come forward and cause all sorts of money.
Yeah, I think there is something about to Save the Children. This is something we'll dive into another episode as well. But a massive trope within Q, of course, as we were explaining before, with the adrenochrome is the child trafficking and the saving the children type thing. So the idea of people just being peaceful and lying down as a result of a Biden win in their conspiracy universe, that the children are at threat, they are very unlikely to see this as a fair election and move on. They're quite likely to see this as the beginning of the end for thousands of fictional children, which they need to somehow save.
I've said something like 800,000 a year in the US alone. That's what they say.
And a lot of these things are based in custody battles and other various sort of more bureaucratic moments of missing children. But don't let the truth get in the way of a good yarn. 800,000 is a fantastic number.
There is a list of some dubious legitimacy, obviously, but there is a list of missing children.
Yes, but of course, these missing children often come back unscathed and quite soon. A lot of these things come from broken homes. They come from issues of domestic violence and all these kind of socio-economic issues that the Anons don't give a left-handed fuck about. All they care about is that their life is an action novel where the good guys, Trump and themselves, are fighting evil because the kids' lives depend on it. Not like they had this whole Wayfair conspiracy, and I won't go into it because that's for another episode. But one of the missing children that these assholes were using to prove that adrenochrome was being harvested released a TikTok video saying, "I'm not dead." It was humiliating. And you know what? None of them had the self-awareness to say, "Oh, maybe we got this wrong." They just moved on to the next crazy shit they came up with.
Yeah, it's because the 800,000 figure is bizarre and way too high. Clearly exaggerated. I mean, even in this country, we do have boys and girls in their late teens, family dislocation, off they go. I mean, I've been involved in missing persons investigations myself over the years, and you'll find that a lot of people don't want to be found. It's not that they've wound up in cults. Some do, of course, but they have chosen not to be part of that life anymore.
Absolutely. And sometimes they're running away from people who are, quite keen to pull them back in.
Yeah, that's right. Let's just get this out there. The scale of child abduction that Q-anon in Australia and globally and the United States believe is going on is wildly exaggerated on the numbers of missing children themselves. And, anyone can look up in Australia's missing persons, and there will be a number of those that are under the age of 18. They simply do not equate to the scale of what QAnon is saying.
And hyperbole punctuates the Q universe where things can't just be realistic. If you were to say that 1,000 kids were turned into bloody mush and adrenochrome after a series of systematic years of torture in an underground bunker, mate, you've got me. You've got my attention. But no, it has to be 800,000.
Yes,
it's not believable.
Right. Yeah, so the credibility is the issue. So pedophilia is bad. Let's get that out there. Yeah. Let's just nail that one to the mast.
It's not controversial. We're all across it.
Pedophilia is extremely bad. I've actually done a lot of work in exposing quite a few of them, a number of them who wear dog collars.
Absolutely. You've done more to hashtag save the children than these assholes have.
Well, that's absolutely right. So pedophilia is extremely bad. And we know that it has, lifelong consequences. So I make a very good argument with you that child sex offending is in many ways worse than murder, because you basically, the victim is cast into a life of deep trauma and doubt. But where are all these pedophiles? I mean, they just aren't. We are talking about, when we look at convictions, when we look at charges and so forth, we're seeing bizarrely too many people who are teachers, police officers, I should say. A couple of politicians in there who get nailed for trafficking or supplying or receiving child pornography. And when we see these big crackdowns, these big international crackdowns, often led by the Australian Federal Police and the FBI and Scotland Yard and what have you, and they'll make arrests, let's say 1,500 arrests around the world. Now, that's a staggering number.
It is.
If you listen to QAnon, you would actually have to believe that at least a third of the population, adult population, weren't just looking at images of children. They were in the business of raping children.
For the elites, sponging them of their blood. I mean, it's an absurd notion. I mean, it goes down to the fact that one of the biggest aspects of the Q universe is that everyone I do not like is a pedophile. It's not new, but they've taken it to incredible heights. I mean, we had it with Heffernan and Frank Arena throwing things around under parliamentary privilege, which is something we plan to cover again in a later episode.
Those two were well ahead of their time, and pioneers in the craft, because if you do throw that stuff around, and under parliamentary privilege, and coward's castle as it is.
Yeah, it does. No one's ever going to forget it. If you get accused of something, even as sort of relatively, and I say relatively in bold text here, minor, of some sort of sexual harassment, that sticks. When you're talking about actual pederasty, I mean, any shadow of doubt that you have violated the space of a child and you are persona non gratis in the minds of many. And kind of rightly so.
Just the accusations often enough. But QAnon actually, they point the finger. Obviously, it's at Hillary Clinton, who clearly is sort of, this incredibly prolific pedophile, eats a baby a day. But then we're also getting into the Hollywood elites,
Now, Hollywood's elites are a real fertile ground, because unfortunately the Jewish banker trope has kind of died off a bit, based on the fact that
it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. There's really only one Rothschild worth a damn in banking these days, and hardly anyone knows who he is. You'd have to look him up to look him up on Google to get a picture.
I have, and there's not much going on there. I mean, look, I don't like the idea we live in a world where we can say $1 billion isn't much, but I think he's only worth about $1 billion. I mean, that is not. Yeah. That's not running the world. That's just another dickhead who has a really big boat.
This is not the House of Saud. This is not Bill Gates. I suppose that's why Bill cops it a bit too, because he's worth a few bob.
He's worth a few bob, but of course that goes into the anti-vax thing, and we're also going to cover that in another episode, and I'm going to do that quite passionately because they piss me right off.
So Gates, we've actually seen this. Freedom Day march or rally outside the Victorian Parliament going back to March, where the chant was lock Bill Gates up. Yeah. So Gates is responsible for a whole raft of sins, apparently. He, through the Gates Foundation. By the way, Bill Gates is actually, the Gates Foundation at least, is basically almost on the verge of solving malaria.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. They've worked to empower women, God forbid.
Probably most of the plaudits belong with Nelson Mandela, who convinced other African leaders to allow people in to vaccinate children for polio. So Africa is now considered polio free, and the Gates Foundation played a significant role in that in terms of providing logistics and supply, and they're on the verge of sort of knocking off malaria.
It's not exactly a list of bad traits. I mean, malaria is one of those capitalistic outliers that is not worth solving, because the people who get malaria don't tend to have many US dollars, exactly. And therefore it's not worth
so but Gates cops this because he's part of that vaccination program, but also because he's a tech. he cops a lot of the 5G flack as well.
The interesting thing about Bill Gates is he's one of the very few Q targets that isn't Jewish.
Yes, but because it is. Look, there's a profound anti-Semitism in his. This is the old trope about cabals of Jewish bankers. Or no, sorry, the word Jewish never appears in their stuff. It's basically cabal of bankers, which is code. Yes. Anti-Semitic code, if there ever was one.
Oh, and the Protocols of Zion come up all the time, which is basically this bullshit anti-Semitic trope that came up in like the 20s or something. And look, you can do your own research, but I advise you don't bother. Yeah. It's trash.
Yeah, well, but it's not just anti-Semitism. That's certainly a big streak of anti-Semitism in QAnon.
There's a massive part of it, and that's the interesting thing with the adrenochrome is that the parallel with blood libel.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, anti-Semitism's really never gone away. But what you're referring to is the 11th century. It was sort of a propaganda piece of nonsense that spread throughout Western Europe, largely started in Spain, where it was said that Jewish parents ate their own babies, ate their own children, and it was designed, specifically to create hatred to a racial or ethnic group, and that would lead to pogroms, etc., and the justified wiping out of these people, which obviously did occur about 300 years later in Spain.
Bloody charming.
These guys are almost invariably white and racist and white supremacists.
Absolutely.
So here it's sort of almost these cryptic clues were being sent out to this sort of great army of people sitting around watching on their computers and trying to make sense of it. And of course they would make sense of it. Well, they try and basically find meanings within it. And this really has, this is straight out of the Stalinist playbook, really, through different media. I mean, basically you create the material that gets people in, and then you give them enough to start speculating around what the sort of end game is. And they will take it and run with it. And they'll be absolutely convinced of the truth of it because they created it. They created it.
Yeah.
So this is it's not just Stalin, it's the Goebbels playbook as well. You throw the material out there and people will make sense of it. They will interpret it the way they want to, and that makes it true to them.
It bloody works. Yeah. I mean, it works.
Yeah. But what I find really interesting is that it's not new. The only thing that's new about this is the internet, the medium, the way in which, and of course that means that you can get information instantly. You don't have to talk on the radio or print it in a newspaper.
And you can isolate yourself to a certain narrative because the algorithm, unfortunately, is continuing to deliver up what you want. The slop is coming into the tray, even though in a responsible world, Zuckerberg and Dorsey from Facebook and Twitter respectively would be doing a lot more to crack down on this.
Yeah, so when we look at Facebook, Instagram, the Zuckerberg empire, what we see is that they've just completely dismissed the notion that they should ever have to edit posts, or probably the correct term is provide some sort of curatorial direction.
Well, that makes them publishers legally, which is a real tricky issue as well.
But I mean, as far as I can tell, Zuckerberg doesn't even play the free speech card. I mean, he's just saying, look, we're too lazy to do anything about this. We don't want, it will affect shareholder value if I've got to employ 4,000 people, maybe even more, to review all this stuff and punt certain users off, punt certain pages, all that sort of stuff.
This level of paranoia, this level of good versus evil, and this idea that anyone in a red state or a certain militia type group, they're good, and everyone else is a child sex trafficker, really gives a pretty strong green light to take the lives of those you disagree with. I don't think that it is reasonable to say that America is immune from having people under the idea of misinformation that is mostly disseminated through Facebook, extrajudicial killings, and a general anti-Semitic for sure, but a general targeting of those that they believe are responsible for, torturing and murdering children.
The liberal left, Hollywood elites, all that sort of stuff. We are not far away from people being dragged out of their homes.
I'd be getting security. If Tom Hanks he's just a straight up baby eater, pedophile baby eater.
And the only reason that we can see for that is that he's made comments that are critical of Donald Trump.
Extensive career on social media, which has the kind of tweets and things that are a bit like he takes photos of things on the roadside in these very ominous sort of weird ways. But that's okay. He's an eccentric Hollywood liberal. Got no problem with that. But they will find a way to spin it, and they will find a way to make it something that it's not. There's always something in it when they look between the lines, and it's fucking tiring because Tom Hanks seems like a good guy, and now he has to probably watch his back.
And in Australia, the Anons here are just dining out on this stuff. But it's probably fair to say that there is a difference. There is a difference between the Anons here and the Anons in the States. I mean, it is a flexible, amorphous thing, Q-anon. In Australia, it's kind of like a smorgasbord where they go, I'll have some of that, I'll have some of that, I'll have some of that. I won't get into the chemtrail stuff, but I will dip into the Bill Gates should be locked up 5G nonsense. I will, of course. Oh my God, children, mate! They're being abducted and moved around in tunnels. Was it 10 kilometres below the surface of the Earth?
Yeah, they've got these ridiculous idea of these deep underground military bases, which is, as we've discussed many times, Linda Everingham's a great work on her very badly designed blog. And basically, Pete Evans also did a nod to this, and this will definitely be in our episode on Pete Evans, and that is going to be hilarious. That there was a lot of roadworks going on in Victoria, which obviously is because Victoria has a lot of roadworks going on.
See, I can see an obvious flaw in that, and that the people digging up the roads are probably not going to 10 kilometres below. If you are 10 kilometres below the surface of the Earth, it's bound to be a bit warm, bound to be a bit stuffy. I mean, there's not a coal mine in the world that goes 10 kilometres down because not only because there's no coal there, but also because it's kind of stuffy and very, very warm.
Yes, and it's also very impressive to get that deep. I mean, like, I'm all for the elites being, sort of superhuman reptilian creatures, but I mean, like, quite something.
That's a deep drill. That's a big
one.
There's no one's going 10 kilometres below because you're almost, Jules Verne stuff. You're almost at the centre of the Earth there, and it is going to be a bit warm.
It's not feasible. It's incredibly stupid, but it's based on the idea, because these idiots make shit up, that 10 kilometres down, there's seismic activity all around Australia. And what's happened is, of course, because of the idea that the children are being rescued, which is all a part of the Storm and Great Awakening, which we haven't gone into, we should, but essentially now that all the child rescuing is coming into play because the saviour Donald Trump is in office in the States and making sure it all happens, I think it's our Navy are rescuing the children from these tunnels 10 kilometres underground, and they blow the tunnels up. So therefore there's seismic activity. Now, apparently, geologically, there's seismic activity 10 kilometres down all the time, and there's some government bureaucrat that takes notes of that and puts it on a website. But of course, these assholes will find anything in anything.
Look, I spoke to a seismologist recently. I said there's been a lot of activity 10 kilometres below the surface of the Earth. He said, well, there always is.
Yeah, that's it. And you don't notice it. It's not the fucking children. I'm telling you that right now.
If you're down there, if you're down 10 kilometres below the surface of the Earth, it's going to be a bit warm, going to be a bit stuffy, going to be a little bit unstable as well. I mean, let's go back to Linda Everingham, because she seems to be a bit of a leading light. And her big dip into the smorgasbord is the child protection stuff.
It's a popular topic.
Of course it is, because it's important to feel, this is where they get their sense of meaning from. This is, I'm battling for the lives of our children, This is nonsense.
Good versus evil.
I mean, I haven't seen any 5G stuff coming from Linda's side, but she's actually employed by Telstra. She's employed as a senior sales executive at Telstra.
Not selling 5G.
I mean, look, you wouldn't want to knocking on the door, come around and install your modem because and hook you up to the NBN because you're going to get there's going to be a fair amount of free conversation with Linda. I've got to tell you that I rang up Telstra wanting to chat to her because I've been through her website, and to her considerable credit, she flogs. These don't have flogs. She gives it away. Other QAnon grifters don't do this. There's an alternate Australian constitution, according
Yes.
to the Australian QAnons. And she gives it away. You can just download it there. And I thought that was wonderful.
Rain Glue will charge $150.
Really weird nonsense going on that website. And I thought it might be an idea to have a chat to her. As it turned out, she was on leave. A bit of a shame.
Yeah,
How long
that's
does
not
this
good.
stuff go on before someone says, well, let's issue writs?
Yeah, someone's got to pull. Like, I think that a lot of people are skating on a lot of thin ice, and Karen Brewer, which we'll also go into in quite a lot of detail later, because she is a gold mine of content. But she got sued by the Nats MP, and look, her name's probably not even bloody Karen Brewer. Apparently it's a character from the Babysitters Club. But the underlying thing there is that if someone pulls a trigger on a defamation suit, you're just going to lose.
Yeah. Look, I mean, a lot of these people won't have assets to be able to cover that particular action you were talking about. I think there was an $870,000 damages bill, close enough to get million plus with legal expenses on the.
100%.
And she didn't bother turning up, so you'd imagine costs will be awarded to the plaintiff. And yes, that's the issue. But I think, if you're going to run around and call prominent Australians without a shred of evidence pedophiles, then, you've got what, we've got particularly harsh defamation laws in this country, but they work for me in these instances.
That's a slam dunk. It's just a slam dunk. Don't go around calling people pedophiles, especially in the instance, and we'll go into this as well in further detail another time. But like people like Lizzie Rose and some of those, sort of sovereign citizens, Bunnings Karen, as she's known. Look, she sits there and she says that Dan Andrews fucks his own kid. I mean, that's just no. You've got no evidence. You've got no basis. You're being an asshole. Rein yourself in.
It makes me think that someone like that wants to be sued, wants to have that, that crazy moment. You just know what like it'd be. It's poor. You feel sorry for the judge. There'd just be absolute nonsense, and then there'd be all sorts of shenanigans out the front of the court. And look, once if she's going to defame the Premier of Victoria or any other senior politician in the country in that sort of way, they're going to keep doing it. So she'll pop into the courtroom and say, I believe that he did it. I'm going to go with a truth defence. Can't provide it. Go outside and talk to Channel 7 and say it all over again.
And then get $50,000 for a fucking interview on a current affair.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the other thing. The media doesn't really know how to handle QAnon, does it? And so sooner or later you're going to see this sort of nonsense, like it was done with the white supremacist groups in Melbourne a while back. We talked to some concerned citizens. Some call them vigilantes, blah, blah, blah. Of course, they were fully blown Nazis, and these people need to be rejected. And QAnon, that these people are going to start turning up on a current affair, going to start turning up on Channel 7 News, start turning up, being interviewed, that will give them some legitimacy.
And they get viewers. These people do get viewers. I mean, I watched 60 Minutes for the first time in a million years when Pandemic Pete was on there, and Thanos Panayiotis had a little plug in there saying how he's, oh, mate, I had no idea. I just this chose me. I didn't choose it. Bullshit, champion. You were chomping for fame, and you ran toward this lowest hanging fruit, which is sovereign citizen dickheads who didn't have a leader.
Thanos Panayiotis. Yeah, let's explain who Thanos Panayiotis is. Thanos Panayiotis is a former nightclub bouncer, I believe, security guy anyway, who walked away from the high-paying world of being a security guard and decided, he said, as you said, that the world chose him, or the life chose him. But basically, he decided that he he wasn't getting enough coverage out of turning up on a Channel 7 cooking show, and so he's gone full anon, full 5G nut. He's a full 5G nut, isn't he? That's one of his things, and one of the organisers of these freedom rallies. He's been charged, I think, twice now with incitement, and he's looking at. He might have to bring a couple of cricket teams with him in February.
Oh, bring your 23 mates, champion. Don't
couple
worry
of cricket
about it.
teams and a scorer, and you're good to go. Yeah. So this is the thing that must be attractive to QAnon potential devotees as well. That you can be a shit kicker like Thanos Panayiotis, and he is a shit kicker. Let's be honest about this. I don't want to sound elitist myself, but this guy this guy, and I've seen his videos and so forth. This guy looks like he's got about an eighth grade education. He'd be flat out spelling a sentence of any sort of complexity, and no brain whatsoever.
He's a hilarious narcissist. He gets really pissed off when people make angry reacts on his Facebook posts. They like all laugh reacts. He gets all shitty and blocks them and has a full tantrum. It's hilarious.
For a messiah, he seems to get very annoyed with his followers.
Very fragile messiah. He's not a messiah. He's a fragile boy.
He's not spreading the gospel at all. He's basically having angry chats about someone who might have said something about him, and I know who that person is. And when I see that person, and it's all that kind of stuff.
He's very good at riling people up, but on very, really basic premises. But he's an interesting leader. And look, as someone who follows these things partially for entertainment, I'm glad he exists because he's very funny.
He is kind of amusing.
One of the things that's interesting, and I think this is worth bringing up because this is, we're just basically just ping-ponging here. When Trump decided that 5G was actually something that the United States needed to focus on, they decided that 5G wasn't harmful anymore.
Yeah, well, that's right. See, when you're in a cult, sooner or later you're going to have to wallpaper over the logical cracks, and sometimes they are yawning chasms, and this is one, of course. So 5G was all state surveillance and dispersing the virus to us and bringing us
tired and sick. It turns you into lesions and death. It's got health effects coming out the wazoo. Blah blah bloody blah.
It was a disaster, and all of a sudden the Trumpster goes, "Yeah, I like 5G," and then they had to accommodate this. So 5G's not not a killer anymore. Not going to leave horrible lesions on your skin. They're not going to control your mind. In fact, going to be benign. It's going to be good for us.
It's a healing force.
A healing force. And this is the lie. So 5G, there'll be still non-nutters around Australia who are still anti-5G. Don't get me wrong. This is not over yet.
No.
But in the States, 5G was horrible. Then the Trumpster said 5G is good, so they had to sort of come up with the alibi for this, and so that was that Trump had insisted with the telcos in the United States and globally, presumably, that there had to be some megahertz of healing.
Yes, of course,
sent out on 5G. So not only now is 5G not bad, it's actually really, really good for us.
It's great. I mean, this really plays into the idea that QAnon is this participatory conspiracy theory where you can choose the bits and pieces you like. You've got your good versus evil, which is great. So you're the one saving the kids and everyone else is trying to bloody drain their brains for adrenochrome. But the magical underlying aspect of this is it's all being sorted out by Donald Trump. And now, when it comes to 5G, I've got a bit of an open mind on it myself. I do have skepticism when it comes to microwaves and things like that. I do like the idea that if we're going to have a ubiquitous technology that may or may not have some kind of, secondary effects, that we'd like to have that highly researched. And I don't believe it has been researched the way it should. I think the way that anti-5G people just make up random symptoms and random illnesses to try and justify a point they've made because of some sort of paranoid delusion in a cult-like community, fucking stupid.
But that's just it. So basically, you're articulating a concern, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, but we have these sorts of concerns that we've got telephones wedged in our ears, and no good will come of this, and kids are looking at screens too often, and all this. Nobody is spared. It's Donald Trump in the United States as a saviour. And there are others, of course. But in Australia, our power structure, our people in our parliaments, our community leaders, our business leaders, etc., nobody is spared. Scott Morrison is seen as a pedophile, and that's quite a lot. There's a sort of bipartisanship to the conspiracy from Australian Anons. Of course, Dan Andrews, we mentioned before, is probably the biggest target.
They're not fond of him. Dictator Dan, they are not fond of him. Lots of Nazi symbolism around him, which I think is Not quite justified, but hey, you know.
Oh, well, a lot of this is pushed around by the Liberal Party too in Victoria, and they should be ashamed of themselves. But, well, when I say that, they're actually sort of reposting some of this anon and soft sit stuff. I saw some come up today. So we don't have that same. We have a saviour in this country. We don't have a saviour in
I
Australia.
think they use the military every now and then. I think they still have that sort of like Peter Cosgrove vibe going on where the Navy's going to save us somehow.
You mentioned the Navy, and if we look at a number of recent military judicial inquiries into the Navy, it's probably not a perfect institution, but you mentioned the Navy before, and no doubt there's also something around the Australian Federal Police as well. Like it's almost a clean organisation.
They need to have something. There's got to be good versus evil. This entire trope relies on a good versus evil platform. And obviously the end user on Facebook and Twitter is a part of the solution. It's like Coney 2012. The idea of awareness, winning the battle, is the battle, which is just completely ridiculous. And just like Coney 2012, a lot of these people who are involved in the end are probably going to wind up masturbating on a street corner in a suburb near you. So like it's not going to go well for a lot of these grifters because I think they're going to believe their own bullshit to a point where they spiral out into insanity.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, look, I read a piece in the Atlantic about QAnon and where it was going. And look, it's certainly not going to go away. I mean, how big is it? How many members? Well, we're sort of relying on Facebook, to be honest, and we're relying on Instagram and so forth. A rough estimate of devotees is around 3 million in the United States, and it's a staggering number. I mean, it's 1% of the American population, so it doesn't seem like much, but 3 million people is a lot of people. And in Australia, I'd suggest their numbers are probably closer to about 20,000.
It's not a small number.
No, it's not a small number, and they're incredibly active. So when we get so we were talking before about how they've basically infiltrated the American electoral system coming up on the 3rd of November and beyond.
Absolutely.
And we're going to see this start appearing in our own politics. And of course, we're wide open because we have a Senate where people can be elected, well, not as easily, not with just a handful of votes that they could be. They've sort of tightened that up again. But any Senate that boasts Malcolm Roberts as a member, that will tell you that anyone's allowed in. Basically, if you basically know how to tie a Windsor knot and put on a shirt, you can walk into the Senate. You're a senator. So this is where you'll see this happening, and it will come through independence, but it will also come through, in my view, in my opinion, the infiltration of One Nation. I mean, half of them are conspiracy theorists 100%. Anyway, and they'll see this as, quite in a quite mercenary way. They will see this as a way of picking up votes. If we talk about 20 or 30,000 votes, well, maybe that doesn't matter, across the Australian electorate broadly. But if it's 1,000 or 2,000 votes in a Queensland seat, then it starts meaning something.
It's a Senate that they're really going to go for. As much as I love proportionate representation there, it is a blessing and a curse because you can get a fad go through the electorate and you can wind up with some senators doing some really harmful shit with parliamentary privilege. Imagine one of these nutters, QAnon crazies.
Unsuable.
Saying they can say anything they bloody like, and it has all the mainstream media documenting it, and they are immune from prosecution. That is a reality I do not want to entertain.
Well, I'll take you a step further. Let's say through an independent or through One Nation, there's the balance of power.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
And we've already seen this. We saw this to a degree with One Nation insisting on a judicial inquiry into the family law courts.
Yes. Yeah.
An extraordinarily harmful exercise that was, and you'll see more of this pandering. So if a government wants to get legislation through, they'll say, "Yeah, okay, what do you want to do?" Well, we want to send the military down the tunnels. It probably isn't going to be as easy as that, but we want to impose, a greater rules on 5G technology.
The potential here is insane, and we haven't exactly seen that the corridors of power as they exist are immune from this, as we've seen with bloody Burn Spy, aka Tim Stewart.
Burn Spy 34, isn't it? Burn Spy 34. He got punted off Twitter, and Stewart's wife is actually a Commonwealth employee.
I think it seems like one of those roles where you give a mate $80K a year to hang around, but it's one of those things where it's too close for comfort. And one of the things that was really interesting is when Burn Spy was saying that he had the ear of the Prime Minister and that he was going to mention ritual abuse in regard to the Royal Commission into Child Abuse, real child abuse that actually happens. And he did. He brought in the ritual abuse term. And this is something that should not be ignored. This is serious. That Scott Morrison is taking cues from someone who believes, and I mean, we'll do an episode on Burn Spy because that guy is hilarious. The shit he comes up with is not even sad. It's just funny. It's pathetic.
But he does have the Prime Minister's ear. I think it was the Guardian. I think it was the Guardian who outed him first.
Great journalism doing
that, and that probably changed the dynamic, I would think, a little bit.
It's one of the things that really, I think, brought Q to the attention of a lot of people in the populace here. But I still don't think that the mainstream media as such, not that the Guardian isn't, but you know what I mean, really picked.
I don't think. I don't think any media organisation is handling this very well.
No,
it's. I mean, some of them will be saying, "Hang on, some of these people read our papers."
Yes, well, that's bloody it. I mean, look, let's face it.
I think there's a genuine lack of understanding. I think that there's a view that this is a narrow little cult that is really a laughable obscenity, and really, the more coverage we give them.
The worse it is. Well, that is in a world without social media, because unfortunately, until Mark Zuckerberg truly nails this down, and nails it down not only in the United States, but in Australia, where organic organizations absolutely distant from the US sort of more mainstay groups, until they are legitimately just deleted, not fucked around with, not shadow banned, deleted, until that happens, the mainstream media do not have a say in this. They will happen without the mainstream media. The game has changed, and their power is no longer concentrated as a mouthpiece for what the people are hearing. This is way beyond their control, and unless Zuckerberg nails down, this will only grow. If Facebook destroys all QAnon behavior, we will see this die within 6 months. But they won't.
I think. They won't. I mean, I'd give it a little bit longer, but I think that's right. I mean, just to sort of highlight how dangerous this is, and why we can do very little to stop it individually and even collectively. In Australia, I mean, you can't ban organisations and so forth. But look, you're going to see some of this sort of really dangerous behaviour, because when your fundamental belief is that children are at risk, you are going to see people come forward and with violent intent, with firearms, with whatever weapons they can get their hands on, they are going to go about some exercise where they think they're heroically going to liberate children. And in doing so, they are going to put enormous numbers of Australians at risk.
The fear and loathing that can come from this has not been really actualised, because, we do not have the adrenochrome papers, but we are one 4chan post away from having our own Australian CYM corporation, which turns out to be a restaurant front for someone who got an undercooked steak at some point. Yeah. And we will have someone, look, we may not have the same kind of guns that they do in America, but we do have guns. And they will brandish them if they think they're saving children from tunnels. Unfortunately, they're working with bad intel, and it's not going to go well.
Exactly, that's right. And in the meantime, while these sorts of events are really just a matter of time. But in the meantime, anyone who slags off of them, including you and me, will get pot-shotted on social media. We'll get all sorts of bad things happening to us and so forth. And that's not the reason the media doesn't have a crack. I think the media really doesn't understand how widespread this is and how potentially devastating it can be to our political and social, basically, selves,
Absolutely. There's a lot of danger involved in this. And look, I'm expecting a few semi-literate death threats if people start listening to the podcast. It's one of those things where they realize that I'm not trafficking children. But I tell you what, if I was working at Chickarone's Mas, the bloody restaurant in Philadelphia that's been stitched up as the child trafficking bloody headquarters of the world, I would not be coming to work on Monday, mate. I would not be coming to work on Monday.
I'm a drooling paranoid myself at the best of times, Joel, and I'll be looking over my shoulder after we've knocked this off. We're going to move on now into a segment that we're going to make regular. It's going to be a wonderful thing. I love Pete Evans. I've been writing about him for a very long time, since we take him back to paleo, Pete.
Since the activated arms days.
Yeah, he was where he's recommending a diet that'd extend your life. The sort of diet that was used by men and women who had a life expectancy of 27 years of age.
That's it. He's always been very funny. I think he has taken it to a new level, though.
So here we are, Joel, the week in Pete Evans.
He really is the last word on Q, Sovsit, all sorts of propaganda, which he shares quite readily through screenshots, because let's face it, if you put the headline on a screenshot, it stops you from finding out the body of the text contradicts your point. So Pete recently posted a video which is very funny for all the wrong reasons. Like, this is one of his mates who is sharing the content, but it uses which I think is a great song, Cult of Personality by Living Colour, which is almost certainly without actual permission. But they insist that Dan Andrews has formed a cult that opens with Pete Evans, like answering a question of some guy basically saying he might be a cult leader, and he laughs it off. Of course, laughs it off because it's incredibly true. But the issue is that it goes straight from Cult of Personality, ha, to Nazi symbols and Hitler, as you do, invoking Godwin's law in incredibly tasteless fashion.
And the short steps to the Godwin's law, isn't it, in this case,
It's embarrassing. Why does it always go there? And they come to this thing of saying all of this for 890 deaths in a population of 6.69 million, which completely defeats the point of the fact that the lockdown that is the reason why the deaths are so low.
God bless you, Pete. He's just gone straight to Godwin's law, just hammered that out, or his friend
did not pass go.
Posting it. So this is pockmarked between a salmon salad recipe and how to cook a steak,
which no one gives a shit about anymore because it's all about bloody Q-anon conspiracy theories and anti-vax hysteria. It's hilarious.
And Pete's knocked on the head, and he's all over. He's not knocked it on their head. He's just not making a quid out of it. So he's just gone, well, where can I do that?
Well, you've got to find something to replace the 800K you lost because you started getting a little bit too wacky for the networks.
So, what's he up to now?
Well, the issue with Pete's balance sheet is that it's lacking any kind of tangible income for now. But the one thing that I take umbrage with is the fact that he has partnered with a fairly notorious multi-level marketing company called doTERRA, and he didn't have to. He's got other things going. He's got his Evolve Health Labs. He's got his cookbooks. He's got all these things to do, but he had to jump into multi-level marketing just like the walking, annoying stereotype that he is.
Multi-level marketing? I mean, it's not a pyramid. It's a trapezoid.
It certainly is, Jack, and it's going to make a trapezoid of a lot of bank accounts for a lot of people who made the mistake of trusting that his exclusive access to Pete's business training and support system was going to make them $1 million by sitting around and looking at anti-vax memes all day on Facebook. It's not a business to back. If the business requires you to annoy your family and friends to buy overinflated essential oils with dubious claims of medicinal bloody results, just don't do it. Stop.
God love you, Pete. You'll never disappoint me. Well, thank you, Joel. Now, we are keeping an eye on Pete Evans, so you don't have to. Let's get those Facebook numbers down. Let's try and get him down under the seven figures, into six. Let's see what we can do there. We'll keep an eye on that. He's at 1.4 at the moment, and we'll see next week how he's travelling. I hope we can get some movement downwards. Punters, you have been listening to the Conditional Release Program with your hosts, Jack the Insider and Joel Hill. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And if you've enjoyed our bullshit, throw us a 5-star review on our podcast app.
Jack can be found on Twitter on @JackTheInsider.
And Joel on @CrunchyMoses, which is a hell of a tag. And we've set up Facebook page, which you can find fairly easily. And finally, all feedback, tips, and death threats should be sent to the Conditional Release Program @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, even if it's simply to tell us that you have plans to murder us if you ever see us at the shops.
Perfect. Thanks, listeners. Catch you next week for more bullshit.
Bye.